We're cranking them out. Very excited for today's guest. Coming from the world of snow sports, action sports, ex-professional rider, now surfer, mother, Shearling Smasher, and also the executive vice president of action sports at Wasserman Group. So she's got to have a whole bunch on her plate. But really excited today to be able to talk to the one and only Circe Wallace. How are you, Circe?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Okay. So
Okay.
I thought you've had an extremely pretty epic journey through the world of action sports and snow, and I'm only 35 now, but what has become pretty clear as you get a little bit older and you start to see the game is we're almost like this kind of first or second, probably maybe in some ways first or second generation of humans that have kind of come through this world which didn't exist 50 years ago, right? And then so I was thinking about it just in the weekend when I was sort of treading along. I'm like, man, when I'm 80, I might have great grandkids that I might be snowboarding with, but that didn't exist 50 years before me. When you think of the arc of your journey within action sports and the macro zoom out, if I'm a flippin' alien, how would you craft the arc of your story within the world of action sports and snow for your journey so far?
Well, I mean, I really cut my teeth as a skateboarder in the Northwest. So that's really where I fell in love with board sports. And, there's an interesting transformation that happens, I think, once you start looking at the world through a skateboarder or snowboarder's lens. And you start to see like transitions where you didn't see them before, or there's just kind of a profound perspective shift, and some of that might have been aided by some early psychedelics, but I think that ultimately skateboarding was really like a space that I felt like I fit in. I think I was kind of an outlier, a little bit of a punk kid who didn't really quite fit in. I was a little bit of an ugly duckling and never really felt super comfortable in school and amongst the social crowd. I was social, but never really found my tribe until skateboarding. And then once you have that perspective shift, inevitably anything with a sideways stance piques your interest, and snowboarding was kind of coming onto the scene in the mid, early to mid 80s was where I discovered snowboarding through a friend who was going local to the Oregon mountains and invited me on a trip, and I was compelled. And so I went on that trip, and it was like all of a sudden the world just opened up for me, because I had grown up with real hippie parents and we had camped all the time, and we were relatively low income and camping was like our thing, right? And so I had kind of rebelled against that in my teens, and really just, I moved to Seattle when I was 14. I really wanted to be kind of in the urban landscape until I discovered snowboarding, where it was like the nature's playground was a whole nother incredible, expansive, and beautiful landscape, right? And I remember night skiing at Pac West. This must have been like 87 or 88, and just feeling like for the first time in my teen years, like I was home, like I was doing something that felt good and was fluid and expressive, and also, aggressive, but also, in a white covered nature, beautiful landscape. And it just felt like the perfect combination of what I needed in at that time in my life to feel full or fulfilled, in a way that really sent me on, quite an interesting journey as a professional snowboarder. I started competing in a lot of the Northwest Series events and did quite well. And, there weren't a lot of girls or women participating at that time. There was a handful of us. We're all still friends. And, that's where I really found my tribe. Like, I made lifelong friends, all of those people. I don't talk to anyone really that I went to high school with, a couple friends that I've kept in touch with who I found through skateboarding. But snowboarding was where I found like my lifelong relationships, and ultimately, my husband, Andy Hetzel, Jamie Lynn was my boyfriend for many years, and just kind of allowed me a level of social acceptance and certain goalposts to hit from a competitive standpoint that I never really appreciated before, and kind of a drive and motivation with a path towards something that was really expansive for me. And so I did quite well on the Northwest Series. I ended up going to Japan and won a world championships there, which is hilarious because it was like a total taco pipe, and it was like a fun crew. I'll never forget it. And then I got sponsored. I was an early Flow Mervin LibTech rider. Jamie Lynn was my boyfriend at the time, and then I moved to Ride. And Ride was where I really found like opportunity, I think, to really develop products. And I'd always been really ambitious and wanting to pictured myself as a business person. Like I really wanted to be a business person, And so Ride gave me a home to do that. Tim and Steph Pogue really let me kind of come in and participate in really meaningful ways in like marketing and decision making. And I got to kind of, see how, or participate, I guess, in the development of the brand. And that was just a really great experience. And, I got to travel the world, had, great relationships, so many friends. There's just so much love, it's like snowboarding is just such a cool community. It's not as angst filled as skateboarding. Women and girls are much more accepted. And so I really fell in love with my community and the actual experience of snowboarding.
Yeah, it's back to the points you see around the perspective shift. It's like, you put a different lens on, and it's kind of unlimited creativity to be able to, go wherever you want, do whatever you want, as fast as you want, that whole thing. And that kind of opens up your mind for possibilities. And I think that translates extremely well outside of just the sport too. You look at things a bit differently, especially, if you've obviously done extremely well in the business game, to be able to see things a little bit differently, but then coming from an authentic place where that community is kind of probably more like organically and authentically synced with each other, with its mission and purpose and vibe, and all the rest of it. And it's a tricky one to sort of navigate. But getting probably a little segue into that business side, being able to go with the team at Ride, were you aware at the time that you were starting to help like shift culture? Or was it just like, I want to make some cool products and do some cool shit? Like what your headspace strategically when you started getting in those rooms and being in the design meetings and the marketing meetings and all these other things, did you feel that this was you were getting a shot to put a little stamp in the ground of like, all right, this is my shit here? Or was it kind of, you're just kind of caught up in the drinking the Kool-Aid moment of like, this is great, I'm getting my own shit? Like, how was your strategic approach to starting to mess with businesses at that time?
I mean, I think it was really opportunistic because I saw an opportunity to like be the one girl on the Ride team and to represent my gender in a way that also was kind of self-rewarding, right? So I think it was kind of a combination of those things. And I don't think I was super like conscious of it. I think I just really, I've always been inherently ambitious. And so I was very opportunistic in making sure that kind of like I wedged myself in there, and that I was really loud and probably pretty annoying, in carving out space for myself
But you did it strategically, right?
Yeah.
You clearly did it strategically. Yep, got it.
Yeah. And I mean, it certainly kind of evolved organically, but I was always kind of vying for like, okay, where's my place here? How can I be, I wanted to be big. I wanted to be seen, right? And really, I mean, if you really want to unpack that, it's like just wanting to be loved. Like we all want that. We all want attention. We all want to feel loved and liked. And I had never had, I was never popular in school. I was never really good at anything, I was good at dance, but it wasn't like I was getting any personal attention. And so I think for me, really, it was about, how do I contribute in a way that is meaningful, but also allows me a level of visibility and perceived success that made me feel good.
Yeah, do you think if you were the cool kid at school, you would have had the same driver to be a player in a different industry in a new world?
Probably. I mean, I look at my daughter, she's at university. She's super self-motivated, gets great grades. She's a freshman playing soccer at a Pac-12 university, super self-motivated, she just chose a different path, but she really, I can tell, like she feels, really rewarded and enriched by the amount of playtime that she gets, or winning a game, or those kind of milestones that are identifiable measures of success, right? And so yeah, I think I came from a very I went to like 12 different primary schools. My family moved around a lot. Yeah, so I had to be really adaptable, but also there wasn't like the same kind of opportunity, like for Ava, my daughter, she was born in this house and, had a level of stability and consistency that I think, and support, that allowed for a more kind of traditional trajectory. I just had to kind of figure that out a little bit on my own. And fortunately I found skateboarding and snowboarding.
We had Mark Frank Montoya on the show a little bit ago, and we were discussing kind of the world of, obviously you got into the ride thing, you started getting the landscape, but then you started to get on the agent side and working with epic athletes from all over the show. And I was talking with Mark Frank about it, around how the timing of his skill set in the market for the media that was around at the time made for this crazy intersection of opportunity and exposure that almost had never been seen before. He's got pro models for every different thing. Like it was probably, like him, the JP Walkers, and like there was only maybe a few that was at that level. Just rewinding back a little bit, what was the key driver in being able to understand the business savvy to able to help your friends and crew within the ecosystem to actually try and commercialize their talents in a way for someone that was trusted in one of them? Like what was the kind of strategic approach of why do this and how? And was it kind of like you're defensive for your friends, or was it opportunistic of like, hey, there's something in here which we can try and do? When you morphed into the world of agent land and having to sort of navigate these crazy commercial world that you got into, what was that key driver behind all of it?
I think the catalyst for me was I grew up with really super lefty liberal parents who were always kind of anti-authoritism, and skateboarding really played into that. And the idea of I always was good at like negotiating my own deals. I really immersed myself in the business. And so the catalyst was really like the opportunity to kind of fight the monster of the big multinational corporations on behalf of the individual, right? Like that was like a really easy thing that also it made me feel good, right? That I was advocating for, that I was fighting for the rights and benefits of an individual, much like an artist. An athlete really only has, a certain period of time where they can really maximize, and to be able to advocate for them with these companies, it just felt like a very natural kind of place for me, given my kind of inner angst and my anti-authority kind of mentality. That really, was why I love skateboarding and snowboarding, right? It was like kind of rebellious. We were always the outliers. We got spit at from the chairlift by the skiers, or, the skateboarders. I had black short hair. I would dye my hair crazy colors. And there was something, about being,
the misfits,
like owning that, right? Like really owning that kind of rebellion in a way that also allowed me to make a living. It was like the perfect fusion of those kind of my ambition and my desire for, you know, material wealth on some level, married with an opportunity and an ethos that allowed me to feel good about marrying those things. Because I think I always had a little bit of conflict because I grew up without money and I wanted nice things. But I also, you know, I didn't just want to be, you know, part of the machine. I wanted to contribute in a meaningful way for people. And so that is really, and I think too, you know, I had gotten injured and I really wanted to find a way to stay a part of the culture and community that allowed me to earn a living, but also allowed me to continue to go be on the mountain and, you know, participate in the culture in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think that advocacy piece is huge, right? Because the majority of the time, you know, 99% of creatives don't understand commerce, and most commercial people aren't really creative. So there kind of is this funky intersection. And I guess we're probably potentially both pretty blessed. We can kind of, you know, we've got creative vision for stuff, but also understand some of the commercial sensibilities and the real world of some of how these things roll. I was going to say, when you first started out, you obviously looked different to most, and then you sit in these flipping boardrooms with these multinational billion-dollar entities. How would you navigate, not potentially maybe I'll start here. Did you use the potential judgment of what they thought you were because what you look like as ammunition to potentially leverage in commercial negotiations? Like, did you play the dumb card a little bit and then strategically roll them? Like, how did you approach dealing with the big boys when you didn't look like them, roll like them, act like them, talk like them, but you knew that they wanted to potentially exploit what you loved, and then you wanted some of what they had? How'd you navigate that?
I mean, I hate to say this, but I think I really used being a woman and being relatively good-looking woman as it was almost like a lot of them didn't know what to do with me, right? So I kind of put them off their balance a little bit. It was a little off-putting. So, you know, I would get in the door, you know, by being cute, and then I would demand a level of respect that was off-putting for them. And so I think that actually often worked to my advantage. There's certainly times in my life where it hasn't, and certainly it becomes less viable as you get older. But yeah, I think, you know, it's funny because people ask me this all the time. It's like, I didn't really even notice the kind of inherent misogyny and sexism of the patriarchal power structures that we all operate in today until I was much older.
Yeah.
Much older. And that was just because, you know, I guess I was somewhat naive and really cocky and just like, you know, you're going to stop me? And that was, you know, that it wasn't until I, you know, I got higher up, right, where I was an actual threat or, you know, that I really felt that kind of oppressiveness of society.
No, I asked that because in my world, one of the few things, most of the boardrooms and corporates, it's all suit and ties and, you know, big dollar, big bullshit. And I roll in a $7 t-shirt and some Nikes, and I'm swearing and doing my own thing. And I've realized that it's an extreme asset, because to your point, it puts them off balance if there's a disconnect, if they haven't had either a long sit down with you or something. And I was just wondering how you would have navigated that for your advantage for the business side of things, which is pretty clear.
I mean, I think it's probably similar to you being Maori and me being a woman, right? Where it's like,
actually, probably more so that, actually, to be fair, you're probably right. Yep, agreed.
Right? It's like, you're still a man, but you're indigenous, so you know, and now it's like, well, is it virtue signaling by actually giving me a seat at the table, or is it real parity, right? And I don't care as long as I have a seat at the table.
See, that's interesting. I got offered a seat at the table out of some tokenism bullshit, and I said, stuff you. This is whack, because they said they wanted to do something, quote, the CEO wanted to do something about this Māori and Pacific Island thing. They called the issue a thing. And I was like, okay, stuff you. But on that point, so you'd rather choose to be in a room where you were there tokenistically by ticking the box bullshit by default as a woman, than there on then not out of the keep it real stuff you like.
Yeah, but the only way that you're going to make change is by having a seat at the table, and however I get there is fine, as long as I have a seat at the table that allows for some real opportunity for my gender, or for women, or for, you know, and it's like, you have to be in the room to change for a paradigm shift. And so however I get there is fine. As long as having a seat at the table allows for real progress.
That's interesting. What about if you felt that you wouldn't actually have any sway or power, but they wanted
then
to
I wouldn't do it. Yeah.
So if it was like you take the seat, but then only if you knew you could kind of shake the tree a little bit and actually make some change.
Yeah, and when I say seat at the table, I mean, you know, have a vote, or, you know, have a real influence on how we get closer to parity, or inclusiveness, or a real systemic change.
But within the landscape of essentially, you know, influencing the influencers to be, you know, your craft, your kind of puppet mastering the strategy behind the background. And I remember, you know, like earlier, you kind of would have been one of the first sort of big agents in the game that, with the trend, if you look at the intersection of, you know, the eyeballs on the X Games and the Olympics and the Tora Brights and the Travis Rices and the media and the tech and just this kind of wave, by the time you hit that apex, no one was going to mess with you anyway. So you were kind of already, you were like perfectly positioned in that spot then, which was great. When you think about the approach of most athletes when it comes to saying, hey, I think I need an agent or not, when they try to have that conversation with you, or you try to have that conversation with them, is it based out of greed or fear?
Neither.
Like, no, I'm saying for them, are they like, I'm fearful of, I don't know this legal stuff, or greed of like, I know I've got 10 years, I need to try and stack some paper? Like the majority of the headspace of the athletes, is it based on fear or greed or something else?
I don't know. I guess I guess I look at it like good strategic business planning, as opposed to fear or greed. Like it only benefits you to have someone in your camp who has the Rolodex, the relationships, the understanding of market value. It's good business planning. And the best relationships that I've had are with athletes that understand the inherent benefit of having representation for those reasons, which is, this person is going to help me make sure I'm strategically maximizing, and I can focus on what it is that I need to do in the athletic realm, which gives me more bandwidth and more time, and whether that's for creative ideation or actual physical training and competition. But I think often, I would say almost all of the athletes that I work with, I signed with parental influence, and the parents understand that they need help to be great. And if you look at, and you know, early on, it was probably a combination of all three. Like, oh wait, this person's going to help me get more deals, or, it was kind of, we wrote the playbook, right? But we wrote the playbook based on a sports model that it was already in existence. But I think certainly now it's almost always a parent going, my kid clearly has talent. I've reached the capacity of my potential to help them effectively, and I need help, and they need help. And so who is the right person, who has experience that can help us maximize this opportunity?
Mm. Got you. The yeah, I'm just trying to unpack a little bit, because you're talking about the strategic business plan. Athletes that are focused on triple cork 14s aren't thinking of themselves as a business or strategic planning, right? So I think about, that line from Jay-Z, he says, I ain't a business man, I'm a business man. And the way, because I was young on the come up, I translated it to, I'm not a businessman person, I'm a business man, a platform. Transition from like unscalable time resource to actually something that can boost out. When you clearly you think of business and platform, they're thinking of person. When you now look at this world of social media and influence and likes, living for likes and all this other bullshit, is the energy shifted from most athletes thinking of themselves as platform before they actually get the talent or the product right first? Like, is there a shift of, because I know in the sponsorship realm, a lot of brands, the first thing now they're looking at is, how many followers do you have, and this and that, and the metrics of where the dollars are coming from feels to, in some instances, a lot of the time, more so than not now, is actually not necessarily the person and the talent, but potentially the platform of what they then have to potentially exploit. How have you seen this shift in the last 10 years since the integration of, or I guess maybe do you feel sponsorship has changed for athletes since the invention or the rapid growth of social media?
It's an interesting question, because the athletes that make the most money in action sports and Olympics are the ones that can do both, who have a robust platform, but they got that platform from winning, right? So if you look at today's stars, even Travis Rice, right, who doesn't compete outside of natural selection, his own legacy property, he competed. And that is how, and he did, Chad's Gap or whatever, which a super park, which really was what, it was a culmination of content, media, and winning. And so
the Tony Hawk moment, he's had a couple of those, right? You have those.
yeah.
I was talking about something on the other day. Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, fine. I think that the interesting thing about skateboarding and surfing and snowboarding specifically is that you don't necessarily have to be competitive to make a living, right? But you're going to make 6 figures versus 7 figures if you're not competing. I can't name one athlete who has purely done the social media or the content play who has made more money than the athletes who have both, which is a real trajectory of competition success that allows them to build the platform and visibility so that their voice or their messaging is meaningful. And I think you could look at skateboarding, which, you win skater of the year or whatever, which are things that allow you, greater earning potential. But the real dollars come from winning, the non-endemic partnerships that come from competition-based success.
Yeah, and clearly navigating out of, after you've got that platform and that community and that brand publicly, navigating to other things which you can control. And I think, Circe, you said there with, say, Travis with natural selection, it's a legacy property, right? It's long game, ownership, equity, IP, brand. There's something of, I always say, like legacy is greater than currency, because it gives you, it gives you longevity, it gives you relatability. Like I was talking to, talking about buddy Mad again. He was talking about, Jamie Lynn was saying he's up in like Bullface Lodge. He's like hanging out there, like shredding, doing art and stuff, and he just does whatever he wants. He's in the mix. It's like, well, he can. He's a legend. He can do what he wants. He's there, 100%. You know, do you feel that social media has made athletes now chase the wrong thing first? Like they go for the platform first instead of the product. They want the followers instead of the switch front bar same ways, or actually learning how to ride switch on your toe side edge to come up to something. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of issues, and this is not specific even to the rise of social media and caring more about doing a 1400 than being a well-rounded athlete, right? You know, we don't want gymnastics, you know, trick ponies. You want well-rounded. I mean, that's why McMorris winning natural selection in Jackson Hole was so amazing, because the first time
redemption.
Yes, because the first time he did bald face natural selection, he literally tumbled down the face, or I'm sorry, it was ultra natural or supernatural. But
he had won X Games, right? He'd won X Games or something, and then turned up, and the dude couldn't even turn and power. And everyone's like, "What are you up to? Like, what the fuck?"
And he was so filled with shame that he came back 12 years later and showed all of us what a snowboarder he is. And like his acceptance speech, you know, which was like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever done in snowboarding. This isn't about me. This is for snowboarding. And that was just like, yes, that is exactly it. And that it was so important to him to like fill in the gaps, right? Yep. Of the experience, the opportunity, and the potential of, and the real true love of big mountain freestyle, that it's like now he is a major contender and will continue to be in a whole nother genre. And that is like, I think, you know, that is the difference between the kids that train on trampolines and just try to, you know, and airbags and just try to get another rotation, versus the one who take a holistic perspective to their participation and their love of whatever it is that they're doing. And I think you look at some of the most winning athletes of their time, and if they don't fill in those gaps, they are a fraction as happy and joyful of their experience as the ones who truly love what they're doing, and all of the different aspects and variety that the sports allow.
It's funny, it comes full circle, you know. It starts off, you know, snurfing and shropping around a bunch of basins, then it starts to get commercialized, gets to the X Games, and then you get the pipe jocks coming through because the Olympics gets in, then you have, you know, the Ross Powers and the Turgay stuff, and then you have, you know, all this stuff, and then now it comes back to the middle again of like, yeah, but can you do it all? You know, and I think Travis was actually probably one of the first ones that actually could, you know, growing up shredding full outdoor backcountry, you know, doing big backcountry stuff, and then he's doing, you know, jib stuff on the community project, and he's doing park stuff, pipe stuff, like everything, you know. And I think that's when it almost felt like there seemed to be a little bit of a split going off with athletes then, because it was like, I'm going to be Captain Jibby Forum Tech 9 stuff, and then I'm going to go this way backcountry, you know, whatever. I do think the filling in the gaps has been pretty clear, that especially for Mark, I'm sure it was probably a massive thing for him as well, because he probably felt like the flippin' man rolled up, got owned, and was like, oh, there's actually more to this than just maybe trampolines and stuff. Oh, maybe I need to, you know. And, you know, I think that's probably going to stay with him a lot, because it especially forever, and it probably gives him a bit more credit, not credit, but yeah, probably a bit of credibility too. But do you feel that the future of snowboarding now is going to make that way forward? Like, how do you feel where the headspace of athletes is now? Like, because some of them are obviously...
I think it's always been like that. Like, you look at Sean Palmer or Andy Hetzel, you know, Andy, who won tons of border cross, he would win pipe. You know, back in the day, we did everything. It was, you wanted to do, I remember we were all riding like asymmetrical race boards, you know, for the weekend slalom events. And I think, you know, once the Olympics came into play, then you start having this really fragmented, you know, specific training, you know, like if you look at like I don't know, as an example, the Chinese team, right? The Chinese team, they train so hard. They only train in the 22-foot pipes, but you're not seeing them on the podium. And the reality is, because I don't think you can be as good of a snowboarder without training or skating, with Tokyo's debut, in all different kinds of terrain. And I think that inevitably you go through a phase where it's like really opportunistic and people are like, oh my God, my kid can go to the Olympics. And so now you have to train like an Olympian. But the reality is if you really want to be the best in the world, you have to be able to have a level of diversity of experience and expression when on the field of play. And that's what's so cool about snowboarding and skateboarding is there's an element of artistry. There is a layer of creativity that I think a lot of the other sports lack. And it cannot just be great without those. You can't be great without some level of, whether it's like Yuri with the YOLO, like developing a new trick or a new perspective shift on things that allow for a level of originality. And that's what's so cool about action sports is that, that is factored in.
So on that, right? You talk about the Olympics. When it first popped up, Terje was the man, didn't choose not to go. How have you felt the relationship between snowboarding and the Olympics? Has it been right or wrong? And then also the same way you talked about, earning your stripe to seat at the table. Do you feel a similar way around when snowboarding was potentially, in many people's views, to get exploited, to get used by someone else? How did you feel? Obviously, you would have been right in the mix of it. What were your emotions at the time then, and then your emotions now?
I wrote a op-ed that I think it appeared in something, and then I was quoted in Newsweek before Nagano. I always say it wrong. That was very critical of the Olympics. What was happening at the time between FIS and the ISF was totally unacceptable. Yeah.
Totally.
And the FIS can suck it. But I think that having represented Tora, Scotty Lego, and Yuri Podlachikov, and now 3 Olympians who are likely to qualify for skateboarding in Deshaun Jordan, Jagger Eaton, and Heymana Reynolds, I look at it as another layer of opportunity. It is not the be-all, end-all. There's no one who's just going to roll in and win the Olympics and then be respected amongst their peers and in the culture and community without a level of diversity of their athleticism and a true love for the sports. And I don't even like to call them sports, right? I mean, they're so different, but I really do see how one, as a young athlete, growing up, why these are Olympic sports, that is a goalpost or a milestone that is worthy of attention. And I also laugh at how poorly organized the governing bodies are and the inherent bureaucratic political bullshit that is totally counter to my own anti-authoritative kind of ethos. But from a business perspective, I only see, blue sky.
When you talk about the Chinese coming to the snowboard game, the government starts to get involved and they start throwing dollars in the mix to get medals, and then when you come to skate culture, it's almost the antithesis of that. It's the absolute anti. We're street, we're core, we're whatever. And snowboarding was that as well, like to many respects, for these dirt bags coming through, blah blah. Then you had like a Danny Cass pop up, or I remember like a Heike Saucer with a mohawk, and no one probably remembers Heike Saucer's name. Everyone's like, just a film dude with a mohawk. That's awesome. You know, and I think I love how maybe it's either the tension or the anti-authoritarianism or whatever that is. There's something like kind of like simplistically humorous about these little like crew that get in and just, you know what I mean? And just like, I don't know if it's underdog mentality. I'm trying to figure it out because I can, you've seen it time and time again where not necessarily that culture gets exploited or commercialized, but you know, when you've got such a wholehearted, you know, like love and passion for something that you do that goes directly at odds to many of the things, whether it's be mainstream or big money or big corporate, the next thing you know, you know, Sean White's on a Wheatie box or some shit. Yeah, I find it humorous, but at the same time, for the blue sky, when they've got a certain time frame and then they can, you know, stack that cheddar and get it rolling, they're gonna make those moves.
Why not? Why not? I mean, I think, you know, you look back at like Kazu, who got fined for not wearing his tie properly, or, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, Ross Rebagliati, who lost his medal for smoking weed. I mean, it is just, but that's also what keeps it interesting.
I think it would be a shame to see high level sport go vanilla, especially when it's something that's driven off soul. But I think to your point before, Circe, is I don't think the best ever will ever not be well-rounded. Like you know, to your point of potentially why the Japanese aren't winning there, that almost becomes an insurance policy to keep the core real, because those points of variance of the perspective of creativity is always going to keep that kind of as the filter for like authentic greatness to have legacy, right? Which is, it kind of makes you maybe feel a bit more hopeful, because regardless what happens and who does what wherever, you're always going to kind of have that kind of that sort of piece.
It's part of our DNA for sure.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you about the athletes that are together today, like now, versus 20 years. What's the biggest difference from a 2000 pro and a 2020 pro in your opinion across action sports? Either in terms of mindset, training regime, nutrition, whatever their world looks like.
Yeah.
Go there for a second.
I mean, we've just had such innovations in so many, you know, I'm teaching a online class, Sports Management Mastermind, www.sportsmanagementmastermind, where we talk about this a lot, which is basically how to help your kids prepare for a successful professional career. And the developments that we've had, even in mindset training, airbags, access to good training facilities is pretty profound. I mean, even just like the adaptation of like real nutrition. I mean, it all comes down to like your environment and how much of those things that you're willing to implement. But I think, you know, moving forward, much like any sport, you'll have to be actually engaging a lot of those training modalities in order to be better than everybody else. And, you know, I certainly think like mental strength and mental training are, you know, across the board, not just action sports, but in general, we're seeing huge proof of their influence.
I remember when I was super young, Michael Jordan had this interview and he said, you know, 80% of this game's mental. And I was like, you know, 4'3". So I'm like, piss off, you're 6'6", you can dunk. It's sweet. That's all you got to do. And then I remember in, it might have been like Wanaka 08 or something. And then there was Keir Dillon, what was it, my Frank? It was, there's a couple of other athletes and they were in the gym. And I remember like, what are these guys going to the gym for? Like, what the fuck? And then you fast forward thing. And then now you've got like full nutritionists and physios and mindset coaches and just all this other crazy stuff that sort of comes along with it. The leaps and bounds definitely come a long way from, you know, like a Danny Cass raging until 6 a.m, turn up with an hour's worth of sleep and winning the US Open, right? Like it feels like it's come a long way in that respects. When you think of high performance competition and stuff now, obviously X Games looks like it potentially might be for sale or not sale, or there's some stuff there. What's your take on the future of X Games in terms of where it's positioned, what you feel it could be? Is it stale? Is it how you could reinvigorate? who could buy it? What would you do with it if you owned it? What's your take on X Games in 2021?
Well, I have a lot of love for X Games. I mean, certainly X Games is one of the biggest properties and platforms for action sports in the space in non-Olympic years. I think the problem is that action sports is pretty small, right? The genres themselves aren't as big as a lot of the traditional sports. So for a big network like ESPN to see the value and be able to sell advertising across platform, it, for whatever reason has become more difficult. We've seen some contraction, although participation's up. I think that it will find a home. I think action sports is important. What that looks like, I don't know. I think that ESPN hasn't updated in a way that is necessary to maintain the enthusiasm of the audience. And I mean, if you look at what we're doing with natural selection, it's like you have to evolve or you die, right? And I'm not saying that. I think X Games really, they had like a huge peak. Remember when they were doing all of their global X Games, and I really hope that they can continue to do that and find ways. But when you're relying on host cities to foot the bill, it's tough, right? It's not the same. And especially in a COVID year, experiential. I mean, a lot of what X Games was doing was making a really great on-site experience for fans, and that is great. And I'm sure that we'll find a way to continue to do that in the new post-COVID world. But I don't know. I think it's tough. I think a lot of the problem is that we haven't done a good job of building new stars. When Chloe Kim and Shaun White decide to check out and nobody cares because we haven't invested in good storytelling, or there's no one who is like really a standout or interesting, then that's on us, right? We as a community and as a culture need to do a better job of telling those stories to make for compelling content and audience engagement.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that the brand of, like, say, X Games and kind of where it's got to, I was looking at some of the numbers behind some of these pay-per-views when it's these sort of celebrity boxing things, right? And I'm like, these guys aren't even boxers, and there's more people sign on to here. Like, are we going like to kind of like, are they going to? Do people just want to see more Evil Knievel type shit? Like, all right, we're going to do a 200-foot jump, like kind of is it the Robbie Madison on New Year's type thing or something? Like, what is the average consumer? And I remember in New Zealand for the Burden Open and stuff, and I'd MC the event and we do the TV show and that, I got some feedback from people like, no one knows what any of the tricks mean anyway. They either just want to see a slam or a backflip. And I'm like, what? Like, can't you tell it's a switchback 5 and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, they don't get it, right? And so then, but then then storytelling is different, because I remember you think about how the narrative of Shaun White was always crafted in the mainstream for X Games, and then Johnny Bob Hoedown from flipping Arkansas was tuning in on a Sunday night at 7 because he wants to see if the redhead guy's going to win his 10th gold or whatever it may be. Storytelling, and it seems it's weird because the quality of competition has gone up 100-fold from what they did 20 years ago in X Games, but there seems to be like a gap or something missing there and I think you might be right there, Circe. Is it storytelling of the athletes, the same way they went from brand, Jordan to Kobe to now LeBron? Action sports is missing those kind of characters and those creatures, maybe. I'm not sure. Do you think it's a storytelling problem with the actual sport itself to keep it sustainable for the future, right? Or is it a formatting problem?
I think it's two things. I think it's first and foremost small genres. So trying to appeal to a mass audience is a disservice. Why are we doing that? And ultimately, we need to get over the idea that 50 million people have to be into it for it to be viable, right? Like, we have a core audience. Let's serve the audience, right? And I think that, you know, if X Games goes somewhere else, a platform that is willing to really dig in to that audience, then I think ultimately everyone's happier. So it might not be as big a dollars, but there's still an audience there that wants to see this stuff. And I think then I think in addition to that, it is about comprehensive storytelling, building characters, and a level of consistency and communication that allows for people a place to go to get that information. And I think that, sorry, come here. You're okay. Sorry, my dog was wanting to say hello. Yeah. And I think that's what we're doing with natural selection, right? We're really building characters. We're storytelling. We're bringing nature to your living room. I mean, we're really up leveling and helping people understand, you know, who these interesting and dynamic athletes are and why what they're doing is totally awesome. And I think that that's been a great exercise for us in, I guess, you know, legitimizing the property through tangible data and results, which we got. And please tune in Friday, Red Bull TV, April 16th, 12 noon Pacific Standard, 3 Eastern.
I think there's a really good point there around just the escapism that the mainstream has. Like I remember when Burden decided to go like this year-round lifestyle brand. Everyone's like, dude, you sell snowboards. Like, what? And then you get a bit older, you're like, actually, it's like, it's the escapism of, you know, Johnny Bob that's flipping an HR down in the middle of some Salesforce tower that wants to get out and into it. And, you know, and that whole sort of piece there too, which is interesting. When you think of this next, oh, sorry there. Sorry, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just cut out for a second. What is going on? Hold up. So what do you see for the next phase in action sports in the next 10, 20 years?
The next phase. The next phase is, I think, incremental growth for each category. I certainly think Olympic inclusion of surfing and snowboarding and skateboarding, allow for a really fun new layer of mainstream visibility through a legitimate platform. And I think that we will continue to see incremental growth and participation. I think we've seen contraction on growth of endemic brands, but I really believe that direct to consumer is going to solve some problems. And we're seeing just these massive disruptive shifts, and whether that's like in crypto or NFTs or, you know, things like natural selection, where we're kind of turning things on their head. I think we'll continue to see interesting, you know, action sports. We've written the playbook for so much. I mean, if you look back, like we had to make our own content, right? No one was going to make it for us. They weren't going to put it on NBC. And so we made really cool stuff. We grew our own audiences organically through participation and community engagement and being part of communities in these tribes. And I think that we will continue to see some of that. And I think a little step back is okay. You know, I mean, certainly my bottom line's been hit, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to go all of a sudden start representing, you know, NBA players. So this is our world, and we're in it because we love it. And I really think in order to be good at something or to make a living, you should love it. And I think that most, if not all people who are actively engaged in this business and our audience love it. And when you have a rabid fan base, even if it's small, as long as you're serving that that market authentically and with good products and participation, you have a viable business. And I'm tired of like this, Amazon like juggernaut perspective on things. Like I'm totally getting back to kind of a micro, hyper local, cottage industries, as opposed to like, we don't need to be $1 billion brands. Let's create, viable businesses that work for these respective audiences by serving them in meaningful ways.
It's almost coming back to like the 1,000 true fans thing, go
Right.
niche, go deep, get glue, have sustainability and longevity. That's where you feel these pockets for will get to.
I do. And I think that all of this private equity and VC conglomeratization that we've had, I mean, you even look at like what's happened at Nike recently with their reorgs, like, let's get back to buying and engaging with authentic brands that are run by people who love the space and come from it. And also, let's not be so greedy that we're all looking for like a 10 times exit. Let's be happy with where we're at in being able to participate in things that we love in a meaningful way and have lives with purpose.
Legacy properties, Circe, you brought up before. I think when the big cash comes in, they get a bit of a pop, but then as soon as then shareholders aren't happy, then they're out of the game, and it's like, well, where'd that story go? What was that? Just a pop up fry in the pan? And it kind of potentially becomes a little bit disingenuous to those who live and breathe it for years and years and years.
Every time. If you look historically, every time.
So the future is bright. So basically, the lessons are, Circe, keep it real, be all around, deep in niches, 1,000 true fans, and enjoy the ride. I think that's probably a good way to wrap it up.
Exactly.
If people would like to, let's do a little quick plug here for your mastermind course. What was that website again? Sorry, Circe, I didn't quite hear that one. What was that website?
It's sportsmanagementmastermind.com. And we're just finishing our 4-week intensive, but we will be offering another one. And check in for updates and sign up for our email newsletter. It's been a really fun experience. I've been doing it with my partner, Sue Izzo, who is a former agent. She has a ton of experience. We used to be competitors, and now we're collaborators.
And the world comes full circle. Suze, I really appreciate all your help, and obviously the legacy piece for yourself in terms of being able to, not only influence the influencers, but have stamps on the ecosystem, the brands, and then, pulling the strings behind the scenes that actually affect a lot of other people's lives, that bring more inspiration and action to their worlds as well, which is super cool. So well done you for all you've done for the sports, and enjoy the rest of it. And I really appreciate your time. I know you're an extremely busy person, so thank you so much for your time today.
It was truly my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks, Circe. Ladies and gentlemen, Circe Wallace, absolute weapon, bloody great chat. Executive Vice President, Action Sports, the Olympics, Wasserman Group, and a whole bunch of other great, cool stuff. Enjoy the rest of the day, team. Hope it all's all going well. This is Robett Hollis, Robett Live, Dash Radio, Dash Talk X.